Friends from the press, good morning. And this morning, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region is holding this press conference at the UN office in Geneva. My name is Xu Guixiang. I'm the spokesperson of the People's Government of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And first, please allow me to give a brief introduction to the people from Xinjiang. They are Ms. Li Juan, Director of the Legislative Commission of the Senate Committee of Xinjiang People's Congress. Mr. Yakun Yakov, Vice President of Kashgar University. Mr. Muhachiram Sharif, Vice President of Xinjiang Islamic Association and the Imam of Yanghang Mosque of Urumqi. On August the 31st, 2022, OHCHR released an assessment of human rights concerns in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of the People's Republic of China. Presumption of guilt includes mostly disinformation and lies made up by anti-China forces, while deliberately neglecting the official information and objective materials provided by the Chinese government. It viciously distorts China's laws and policies, discredits the necessary, legitimate, and just nature of Xinjiang's counterterrorism and de-radicalization efforts, and disregards the significant achievement in human rights development in Xinjiang. It severely violates the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and undermines the credibility and fairness of OHCHR. Facts have shown that this assessment is just a farce staged by the US and some Western countries. It is a politicized document mischaracterizing the facts. It's miles away from the statement made by then UN High Commissioner for Human Rights upon the completion of her visit to China in May this year, which lays bare the scheme of the anti-China forces in the US and some other Western countries of politicizing human rights. The Information Office of the People's Government of Xinjiang has carefully studied the assessment. And against the fallacies in the assessment, we want to make clear the truth and facts in today's conference. We hope the international community can uphold fairness and justice, make analysis and judgment in an objective and rational light, and shape up a right perception of Xinjiang-related issues. First, I'll give the floor to Ms. Sulhayat Ismail, Vice President of Kashgar University. Good morning. In the fifth paragraph of the assessment, OHCHR has conducted, in accordance with its standard practice and methodology, 40 in-depth interviews with individuals with direct and first-hand knowledge of the situation in Xinjiang. 26 of the interviewees stated that they had been either detained or had worked in various facilities across Xinjiang since 2016. And securing interviews posed significant challenges. Most of the interviews were conducted remotely for COVID-related or security reasons. We resolutely oppose such characterization. As far as we understand, some people in Xinjiang are not happy with their deserved punishment for breaking Chinese law. After leaving the country, they have shunned mentioning the offenses they committed. Instead, they portray themselves as victims and human rights defenders, giving false testimonies here and there as a perjurer or so-called witnesses. They've made numerous lies about Xinjiang, which have fooled many people and misled the international perception on Xinjiang. On this regard, Xinjiang has exposed themselves and their acts by holding press conferences, making documentaries, and releasing research reports. For instance, in a press conference in 2021, on April the 10th, May the 26th, and June the 11th, in 2021, the press conferences were held where the relatives and colleagues of these so-called witnesses, and as well as the police officers who handled their cases, presented detailed information about them and refuted their lies. In these years, people of all ethnic groups in Xinjiang have spoken of their personal experience through various means, and people from all walks of life from around the world express their understanding and support for the policies in Xinjiang. OHCHR has also received a lot of materials and learned about relevant situations. For example, since September 2019, nearly 200 people of various ethnic groups in Xinjiang have sent emails to OHCHR and Ms. Bachelet herself. Some denounced the atrocities of terrorist and extremist forces. Some introduced their studies at the VETCs and their situations after graduation. Some share their experiences of creating a better life with hard work. And since January 2020, Xinjiang has held 78 press conferences. 675 representatives have taken part, including experts, scholars, graduated trainees from VETCs, migrant workers, primary level women's representatives, persons from social organizations, entrepreneurs, journalists, religious persons, and also people who were released after completing their prison sentence. They also talked about their personal experience and expressed their views on many issues. And since December 2018, UN officials, foreign envoys to China from many countries, and also representatives of relevant countries to Geneva, the OIC Secretariat, the SCO Secretariat, and also diplomatic envoys of its member states, ASEAN think tanks, journalists, diplomatic envoys from Latin American and Caribbean countries to China, also foreign envoys from Africa, and also journalists and the religious community. All these people, 2,415 people from over 170 countries and regions have visited Xinjiang. They shared what they witnessed and heard during the tour around Xinjiang, and they gave positive comment on Xinjiang's practices in counterterrorism, de-radicalization, and protecting human rights. In May this year, the former High Commissioner, Ms. Bachelet, visited Xinjiang, and the Chinese side comprehensively introduced its measures and achievements in counterterrorism, de-radicalization, Xinjiang's social and economic development, and also in employment and protecting labor rights. She visited Kashgar and Urumqi and held talks with ethnic minorities, scholars, and experts, and including people from various sectors, from which she understood the real situation in Xinjiang. At a press conference upon the completion of her visit to China, Ms. Bachelet stated that the visit was open and candid, and all meetings were arranged by OHCHR and conducted in an unsupervised manner. She also said it was an historic achievement that China had accomplished its poverty alleviation endeavor and eliminated extreme poverty 10 years ahead of schedule. And also the introduction of universal coverage of medical insurance and unemployment insurance schemes ensure the protection of the right to health and broader social economic rights. China supports the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDG have also received much attention. However, OHCHR turned a deaf ear to the facts presented by so many representatives from Xinjiang. The voices from over 2,000 international people from over 170 countries, and even doesn't believe in what the former High Commissioner and her advance team saw and heard in Xinjiang. Instead, they believed in the 40 so-called victims and their interviews before being able to verify their identity experience. So this is a typical example of presumption of guilt, which is neither scientific, rigorous, nor serious. So the conclusions is nothing but a patchwork of falsehoods and has no credibility at all. So I will go on. And the second part of the assessment, paragraph 9 to 13, analyze the changes to the number of the Han and Uyghur populations in Xinjiang and the reasons for the increase in the Han population. It emphasizes that the UN human rights mechanisms have raised concerns, however, about discrimination in economic, social, and cultural spheres in ethnic regions, including in Xinjiang, over many years. The assessment explains frequent violent terrorist attacks in Xinjiang and the government's Strike Hard campaign. And in paragraph 151, it recommends that China undertakes a full review of the legal framework governing national security, counterterrorism, and minority rights in Xinjiang to ensure their compliance with binding international human rights law, and urgently repeal all discriminatory laws, policies, and practices against Uyghur and other predominantly Muslim minorities in Xinjiang, in particular, those that have led to the serious human rights violations as detailed in this assessment. So we strongly oppose these representations. We believe that the analysis are far from the facts in Xinjiang. The frequent violent terrorist attacks in the past in Xinjiang are neither attributable to the increase in Han population nor the so-called ethnic discrimination. Rather, it is because that terrorist and extremist forces have distorted, fabricated, and tampered with the history of Xinjiang, exaggerated the difference among ethnic groups, incited ethnic estrangement and isolation and hatred, and preached extremism and violence. And in particular, since the 1990s, under the influence of the profound changes in the international situation and the spread of terrorism around the world, the ETIM forces at home and abroad stepped up collusion and declared to build the country of so-called East Turkestan by jihad. Well, in the name of ethnicity and religion, and by exploiting people's ethnic sentiments and religious beliefs, they incited religious fanaticism, spread extremism, and incited people and carried out terrorism activities. This is the root cause of the instability in Xinjiang in the past. The so-called allegation of ethnic discrimination, we believe there is no such thing as ethnic discrimination in Xinjiang. According to the Chinese Constitution, all ethnic groups in the PRC are equal. The state protects the lawful rights and interests of ethnic minorities and upholds and develops ethnic relations characterized by equality, unity, mutual assistance, and harmony. Discrimination against and the oppression of any ethnicity is prohibited. And any act which undermines ethnic unity and instigates separation is prohibited. So I will follow with 6 aspects. In terms of laws, there is no discriminatory provision in local regulations in Xinjiang. For instance, Article 5 of the regulations of Xinjiang on the work of ethnic unity and progress stipulates that all ethnic groups are equal. Article 8 of the regulations of Xinjiang on the establishment of model areas of ethnic unity and progress stipulates that discriminatory words and deeds are proscribed. Article 3 of the regulations of Xinjiang on religious affairs stipulates that any organization and individual shall not discriminate religious believers. And Article 9 of the measures of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region on implementation of the Employment Promotion Law of China stipulates that workers shall not be discriminated against in employment on the basis of ethnicity, race, sex, religious belief, and Article 2 of the regulations of Xinjiang on the work concerning spoken and written languages stipulates that all ethnic languages are equal and all ethnic groups are protected to use and develop their languages. Politically, all ethnic groups enjoy equal rights to participate in the administration of state and local affairs and in exercising their democratic right in community-level governance, regardless of their population size, history, development level, and custom. For instance, the 13th National People's Congress of China has 58 deputies from Xinjiang. 36 of them, or 62%, are from ethnic minority communities. The NPC Standing Committee also has ethnic minority members from Xinjiang. The 13th People's Congress of Xinjiang consists of 542 deputies. 349, or 64%, are from ethnic minority communities. Economically, Xinjiang has committed to a people-centered philosophy and enjoys rapid social and economic development, and sustained investment has been made to improve people's well-being. All ethnic groups enjoy equal development opportunities to enjoy a happy life. Their economic rights are under effective protection. Let me give you an example. In the Charlong township of Xinjiang's Kizilsu Autonomous Prefecture, there used to live some ethnic minorities who inhabited in the mountains with harsh natural conditions. The villagers lived on meager income by herding animals for generations and generations. In September 2019, a total of 1,164 households, including those from this township, moved out of the mountains from these villages to a newly built relocation site for poverty alleviation, where there are tap water, electricity, and natural gas, thus greatly improving their well-being and living conditions. There are a lot of necessary facilities in the neighborhood, including schools, clinics, making education and medical care accessible. The government also invested in the building of 1,700 greenhouses to help the villagers increase income. So the villagers have turned from herdsmen into workers. Some of them started their own businesses with the newly obtained skills and found very stable jobs. Many people from around the world have visited this neighborhood, and we have also introduced their situation to the international community in various means. By the end of 2020, nearly 170,000 impoverished people from 40,000 households have been lifted out of poverty by relocating from these impoverished areas. In terms of culture, Xinjiang attaches great importance to protecting and developing defined traditional cultures of ethnic groups. We have made sustained efforts to improve public cultural services. While promoting the standard spoken and written Chinese, we also encourage the ethnic groups to learn spoken and written languages from each other. For instance, the Uygur Mukam and the Kyrgyz epic Manas have been listed on the national representative list of intangible cultural heritage, and 96 items are on these national list, and 315 items were listed on the autonomous regional level list. The language of ethnic groups are widely used. Now, Xinjiang publishes newspapers, books, audio and video products, and electronic publications in 6 languages, including Standard Chinese, Uyghur, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Mongolian, and Sibe. The Xinjiang radio and television station broadcasts TV programs in 4 languages and radio programs in 5 languages. And also the traditional festivals of ethnic minorities, including the Eids, are made public holidays. So the people in Xinjiang enjoy 4 more days of public holiday compared to the rest of China. And these traditional ethnic minority sports meetings have been held for 10 sessions in a row, which combines ethnic minority traditions with sports and competition. This shows the spirit and character of the ethnic groups. And in terms of social security, Xinjiang has established a social security system that covers all its population. The capacity in response to public health emergencies has been strengthened. The reproductive rights of ethnic minorities are under strong protection. And also in education, we have promoted the balanced development. 9-year compulsory education is available across Xinjiang, and 15-year free education is available in the southern part of Xinjiang, which is rarely seen in the rest of China. Rural children from 4 to 6 years old in Xinjiang are admitted to kindergartens free of charge. And also we have been providing free annual health checkups for urban and rural residents. And for medical services, the payment can be made after service. A line of defense and the safety net have been put in place for the protection of the health of people of all ethnic groups. And also in terms of family planning policy, Xinjiang implements preferential policies for the Uyghur and other ethnic minorities. So I would like to give you some background. China's family planning policy started from the urban areas and then to rural areas, and first to Han area, and then the ethnic minorities. For ethnic minorities, the policies are more preferential treatment, and in line with the local conditions and in accordance with state laws and regulations, Xinjiang has formulated its own family planning policies. In the early 1970s, family planning was first applied to the Han people, and in the late 1980s, the policy were applied to ethnic minorities. The measures on family planning released by Xinjiang in 1992 stipulated that urban Han residents could only have 1 child per couple, and in the farming and pastoral areas could have 2. For ethnic minorities, urban residents could have 2 2 children per couple, and those in farming and pastoral areas would have 3. Ethnic minority groups with smaller populations were not required to follow this family planning policy. This is one of the reasons why the ethnic minority population in Xinjiang maintained a rapid growth rate. You may refer to the 7th National Consensus in 2020 for the changes in population in Xinjiang. And these data are available on the portal website of Xinjiang, the Tianshannet. And in 2017, Xinjiang amended the regulations on population and family planning, where the universal family planning policies were introduced for all ethnic groups, 2 children per couple for urban residents and 3 for rural couples. In June 2021, according to our relevant national policies, Xinjiang began to implement the policy of 3 children per couple for all ethnic groups. So from this information, you can see that the family planning policy was applied to ethnic minorities 17 years later than to the Han people in Xinjiang. So this is the end of my introduction. That all ethnic groups in Xinjiang enjoy equal political, economic, and social rights. And you can see from this information that in terms of from laws, policies, and the implementation of these laws and policies, there is no such thing as ethnic discrimination. So next, I'll give the floor to Ms. Li Juan, Director of the Legislative Affairs Commission of the Standing Committee of Xinjiang People's Congress. Friends from the media, good morning. I would like to make an explanation on the legal-related documents. For instance, in paragraph 24, it claims that the legal texts appear to conflate what might otherwise be construed as matters of personal choice in relation to religious practice with extremism, and extremism with the phenomenon of terrorism, that significantly broaden the range of conduct that can be targeted under a counterterrorism objective or pretext. And such conflation through the application of broadly stated or vague definitions pose particular problems in relation to criminalization under Chinese criminal law. In paragraph 35, it says that by associating extremism with certain religious and cultural practices, it carries inherent risk of unnecessary, disproportionate, and discriminatory application to the ethnic and religious communities concerned. In paragraph 84, it claims that such exceptionally broad interpretations of extremism, often explicitly targeting standard tenets of Islamic religion and practice, in effect renders virtually all such conduct in potential breach of the regulation of religion and of broader government policies within the ambit of counter-extremism policies, with attendant risks of either criminal sanctions and or re-education. An environment is thus created in which religious or cultural practice or expression is conflated with extremism and can lead to serious consequences for persons to identify it. Paragraph 92 claims that certain types of conduct are considered a sign of extremism in practice, even if the conduct as such may in fact not be unlawful, such as having a long beard or declining to use a television. To these allegations in the assessment, we express our firm opposition. The legal and policy framework for China's counterterrorism and de-radicalization work is in line with the internationally recognized principle of legal certainty. China has a statutory law system. For example, the definitions and scopes of application of terrorism and extremism are clearly specified based on the differences in circumstances, degree of harm, nature, and manifestation of illegal acts and crimes, so that the counterterrorism and de-radicalization work is better regulated, more precise. So we have made clear distinguish from these different natures and manifestations and degree of harm. This has ruled out arbitrary enforcement due to vague overstretching and general legal provisions, and prevented violations of human rights. According to the counterterrorism law of China and the measures of Xinjiang on implementing the counterterrorism law of China and many other laws and regulations, we have a clear definition of terrorism, which refers to any proposition of or act that, by means of violence, destruction, or intimidation, creates social panic, endangers public security, infringes upon personal and property rights, or coerces state organs and international organizations so as to achieve political, ideological, or other purposes. China's counterterrorism law identifies 5 major manifestations of terrorist activities. On this basis, the measures of Xinjiang on implementing China's counterterrorism law further identifies 7 major manifestations of terrorist activities in details. And extremism refers to any proposition or act by distorting religious doctrines or other means that incites hatred and discrimination and agitates for violence. The regulations of Xinjiang on de-radicalization draws a clear line between ethnic customs, normal religious practices, and extremist activities. And it identifies 15 major manifestations of radicalization. These 15 manifestations are nowhere near normal religious customs at all, nor are they part of people's normal life. Instead, they are affected and distorted by extremism, which severely interfere in and affect people's normal work and life and pose great harm to society. For some time in the past, extremist forces tied extremism to ethnic customs and habits and traditions. They denied and rejected all forms of secular culture, preaching a life without television, without radio or newspaper. And they also said that they could not cry at funerals or could not laugh at weddings. This kind of rejection has led to the impact, constraint, and isolation of some ethnic minority cultures. We know that Xinjiang is known for the people's people are very good at singing and dancing. There are a colorful ethnic minority culture. But under extremist influence, many people have developed a distorted and depressed mindset. And such a phenomenon goes against secular life, against the progress of humanity. It's also a break to the progress of humanity, and also goes against modern civilization. For instance, the government, when it tries to lift people out of poverty, has provided televisions for the rural residents in southern Xinjiang free of charge, with an aim to help them improve living conditions and embrace modern civilization. However, extremists advocated that these televisions provided by the government are not halal, under such incitement and coercion, a small number of people affected by extremism smashed the televisions and refused to watch TV or listen to radio, and refused to embrace a modern lifestyle. For instance, in Shula County in Kashgar Prefecture, there is a middle school, a headmaster, a middle school named Niyaz Abdul Rashid, who was a knowledgeable and well-respected teacher. Just because he taught students the theory of evolution, he and his wife were fatally killed by a terrorist group because, according to the group, the theory of evolution violated the so-called religious doctrines. For some time, extremist forces, under the cover of religion, brainwashed people with the jihad stuff, betting them to die for their belief and to enter heaven. They instigated religious fanaticism and spread these kind of lies and incited the common people to be terrorists. For instance, a man named Eni Hassan organized and assembled Nur Muhammad Abdul Hamid, Atawullah Tursun, and others to listen to and watch terrorist audios and videos. They were brainwashed by terrorist and extremist thoughts and formed a terrorist organization headed by Eni Hassan and planned for the murder of patriotic religious figures. On July the 30th, 2014, Nur Muhammad and two other members, following the instructions from Eni Hassan, struck Jumat Tayyir, then the senior mullah of the famous Iqta Mosque in Kashgar, struck him several times in the head, neck, and back with an axe after the morning Tayyir prayer, killing the senior mullah on the spot. They also wounded the face of his driver before fleeing the scene. Abdelkim Hassan and 11 others gathered for multiple times to listen to the preaching on the migration for jihad, killing of heretics, and founding an Islamic caliphate. And also they gathered to watch terrorist videos released by the ETIM and learn how to make explosive devices. They formed a violent terrorist organization, conducted physical training, raised funds to buy knives, petroleum, vehicles, and materials for making explosives, and they made over 30 remote control and carry-on explosives to conduct terrorist activities, including bombing and killing in Kashgar. On July the 30th, 2011, members of this organization stabbed a truck driver at the crossroads, drove the hijacked truck into crowds, and attacked innocent people with knives in a pedestrian street in Kashgar, and also exploded the devices. And they also conducted terrorist acts on the second day. 2 incidents left 13 innocent people dead and 44 injured. Nasrullah Anayatullah, Muhammad Dawood, and Kamardin Osman, under the influence of extremism, formed a terrorist organization, declared jihad, and gathered and conducted terrorist training in a cave in Yar township of Turban city. They once attempted to attack a police station in Turban, for which they had made terrorist flags and petrol bombs and both knives and axes, but did not succeed. At the midnight of August the 3rd of 2013, Nasrullah Anayatullah and 2 others stabbed 2 attendants at the bathing center in Turban, leaving 1 dead and 1 severely wounded. On the evening of August 6, this organization burned down a salvage yard run by a couple in Yaschila village of Yar Township with petrol bombs. On the 13th of August, Kamardin Osman and 4 others killed 2 women with a knife in a rented house near the National Highway 312 in Turpan. On August 15th, Nasrullah Anayatullah and 2 others killed a cleric of the Klaskan Mosque in Yar Township with a knife. And faced with such severe and complex counterterrorism situation and the urgent demand by people of all ethnic groups in combating violent terrorist crimes and ensuring safety of the people and their properties, Xinjiang has held high the banner of socialist rule of law and carried out counterterrorism and de-radicalization efforts, which does not target any specific region, ethnic group, or religion. Following the principles of protecting lawful practices, proscribing illegal activities, containing extremism, resisting infiltration, and punishing crimes, the government strictly combats all forms of terrorism and prohibits violations of the law and crimes such as spreading extremism, inciting ethnic hatred, and dividing the country by means of religion. At the same time, it fully respects and safeguards the rights of citizens, including freedom of religious belief, protects lawful religious activities, meets the normal demands of religious believers, protects the legitimate rights and interests of citizens and organizations, and respects the custom of different ethnic groups. So there is no such thing as religious or cultural practice or expression being conflated with extremism. And that's all from me. Next, I'll give the floor to Deputy Director General of Xinjiang Public Security Bureau.
各位媒体记者朋友，上午好。
Friends from the media, good afternoon. Paragraph 32 of the assessment claims that these specific counterterrorism powers come in addition to the general powers of the public security organs to take suspects into custody. And pre-trial detention for lengthy periods without independent review, which is contrary to international human rights laws and standards. Under the criminal procedural law of the People's Republic of China, a person can be in detention for up to 37 days before any formal review and decision that an arrest is warranted. We firmly oppose such remarks. In handling criminal cases involving terrorism or extremism, law enforcement and judicial departments strictly abide by the requirements of laws and legal procedures of China. The so-called pre-trial detention without independent review is non-existent. Specifically, public security departments shall immediately examine the available criminal clues. Upon examination, cases that do not constitute a crime but are subject to the administrative proceedings shall be handled accordingly or transferred to the relevant authorities in accordance with the law. Cases with established facts suggesting a crime where criminal irresponsibility needs to be investigated and which fall under the jurisdiction of the examining public security department shall be filed for investigation with approval by the chief of a relevant public security department at or above the county level. Public security departments shall investigate criminal cases that have been filed and collect and obtain evidence that can prove the guilt or innocence of the criminal suspect and the severity of the crime. For a case whose investigation has been concluded, it should be transferred to a people's procuratorate for examination and prosecution. Procuratorate shall, upon receiving a case, transferred to a public security department for examination, earnestly find out whether the facts and the circumstances are clear, whether the evidence is indeed sufficient, whether the nature of and name of the crime are correctly determined, whether criminal responsibility should be investigated, and whether the investigation activities are lawful. Where supplementary investigation is needed, the case in question shall be promptly returned to the relevant public security department for supplementary investigation for 2 times at most. Where second supplementary investigation still finds that the evidence is insufficient to meet the conditions for prosecution, a decision of no prosecution shall be made. Where an act is not deemed a crime for its circumstances are obviously minor and its harm is not serious, or where the deadline of prosecution has passed, a decision of no prosecution shall be made. Where the circumstances of an act or are minor and do not require sentencing for punishment or an examination from criminal punishment is granted according to the provisions of the criminal law. A decision of no prosecution shall be made. Where the circumstances require sentencing for punishment, a public prosecution shall be initiated in the People's Court according to some relevant procedures. The criminal procedure law of the People's Republic of China stipulates that criminal detention must meet the following 2 conditions at the same time, which is the person to be detained is an active offender or a major suspect, that is an individual with evidence showing that he or she is suspected of a serious crime. Second, under one of the statutory emergency circumstances, Articles 80 and 163 of the Criminal Procedure Law make corresponding provisions on the circumstances of detention by the public security organs or procuratory organs, respectively. If the above conditions are not met, the public security organ and the procuratory organ shall not detain any criminal suspect. According to Article 91 of the Criminal Procedure Law of the People's Republic of China, if the public security organ deems it necessary to arrest a detainee, it shall, within 3 days after detention, submit a request to the People's Procuratorate for examination and approval. Under special circumstances, the timeline for submitting a request for examination and approval may be extended by 1 to 4 days. For the arrest of a major suspect involved in crimes committed from one place to another, crimes committed repeatedly or in a gang, the timeline for submitting a request for examination and approval may be extended to 30 days. The People's Procuratorate shall decide either to approve or disapprove the arrest within 7 days from the date of receiving the written request for approval of arrest submitted by a public security organ. If the People's Procuratorate disapproves the arrest, the public security organ shall immediately release the detainee and inform the People's Procuratorate of the result without delay. Meanwhile, the Criminal Procedure Law of the People's Republic of China has set up a complete set of remedial procedures for criminal coercive measures taken by the public security organs. That includes applying for altering or canceling the coercive measures for the suspect, or filing an application or appeal to the People's Procuratorate or the People's Court. The People's Procuratorate shall perform necessary provisions on residential surveillance, detains or arrests, and other coercive measures taken by the public security organs in investigations in terms of necessity and legitimacy. If an error is identified, it shall be corrected in accordance with the law. It should be pointed out that the criminal detention imposed on criminal suspects according to laws of a country is a general mandatory measure against criminal activities rather than a specific category of crimes. A clear-cut timeline and supervisory procedure has been clearly prescribed when it comes to the duration of criminal detention. For general criminal cases, the time limit for detention shall be no more than 3 days. For crimes committed from one place to another, or repeated crime, or those committed in a gang, it can be extended to 30 days under special circumstances that have been strictly approved. The relevant laws and regulations characterized by well-defined conditions, clear requirements, and strict procedures are in conformity with our judicial realities and spirits of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Hence, there's no such thing as contrary to international human rights laws and standards. OHCHR's accusation is merely making one-sided interpretation, which is out of context. Thank you. Next, let's welcome Zuliahat Ismail, Vice President of Kashgar University. Next, I will deliver a response to the relevant content on the population in Xinjiang in the assessment. Paragraph 106 of the assessment claims that official population figures indicate a sharp decline in birth rates in Xinjiang from 2017. Data from the 2020 Chinese Statistical Yearbook covering 2019 shows that in the space of 2 years, the birth rate in Xinjiang dropped approximately 48.7%, from 50.88 per thousand in 2017 to 8.14 per thousand in 2019. The average for all of China is 10.48 per thousand. Well, in the paragraph 107 of the assessment, it claims that the Uygur majority areas represented the bulk of this decline, with 2 of the largest Uygur prefectures especially affected by it. In Hetian, which is 96% Uyghurs, birth rates went from 20.94% in 2016 to 8.58% per thousand in 2018. Similarly, the birth rate in Kashgar, which is approximately 92.6% Uyghur, dropped from 80.90% per thousand in 2016 to 7.94% per thousand in 2018. Even taking into account the overall decline in birth rates in China. These figures remain euro and stock. For such remarks, we believe that the assessment issued by the OHCHR is an attempt to attribute the dropped birth rate in Xinjiang entirely to its fight against terrorism and extremism in the past few years, suggesting it suggests special restrictions on the development of the population of ethnic minorities, including the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Such attempt is completely surmised in disregard of the basic facts on Xinjiang's population growth, which severely violates the objectivity of the population development. We are strongly opposed to it. The population of Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities in Xinjiang has continued to grow. Data of national census show that the population of ethnic minorities in Xinjiang increased from 4,451,500 in the first census, which was conducted in 1953, to 4,948,900 in the second census in 1964, which is up by 497,400, or a compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of 0.937%. It reached 7,797,500 in the third census, up by 2,848,600, or a CAGR of 2.56%. It grew to 9,461,500 in the fourth census in 1919, which is up by 1,664,000, or an annual growth rate of 2.45%. It further grew to 10,969,600 in the fifth census, up by 1,508,100, or an annual growth rate of 1.49%, which is 12,985,900 in the sixth census in 2010, up by 2,016,300, or an annual growth rate of 1.7%, and 14,932,200 in the seventh census, which was conducted in 2020, up by 1,946,300, or an annual growth rate of 1.41%. In terms of the Uyghur population, data from national census show that the figure was 3,607,600 in the first census, 3,991,600 in the second census, 5,955,900 in the third census, and 7,191,800 in the fourth census, 8,345,600 in the fifth census, 10,001,300 in the sixth census, and 11,624,300 in seventh census that were conducted respectively in 1953, 1964, 1982, 1990, 2000, 2010, and 2020. The number of population increase between each census was 384,000, 1,964,300, 1,235,900, 1,153,800, 1,655,700, and 1,623,000. representing an annual growth rate of 0.92%, 2.25%, 2.38%, 1.5%, 1.83%, and 1.52%. This data show that since the founding of the PRC, the Uyghur population has maintained a relatively high growth rate, a trend shared with the total population growth of the region. In particular, the Uyghur population grew at an annual growth rate of 1.67% during the first 2 decades in the 21st century, from 8,345,600 in 2000 to 11,624,300 in 2020, which is much higher than that of the country's ethnic minority population, which stood at 0.83%. In terms of the demographic development pattern, the dropped birth rates and delayed population growth in Xinjiang, including the Uyghurs, conform to the general trends of the demographic development elsewhere in the world. According to the modern theory of demographic transition, every country or region passes through stages of demographic development, which is in stage 1, high birth rates, high death rates, and low growth rates. Second, high birth rates, low death rates, and high growth rates. And stage 3, low birth rates, low death rates, and low growth rates. The world's demographic trend also indicates that with an increasing level of social and economic development, people tend to have a stronger notion of self-value realization and sound maternal and childcare, and the birth rate and the growth rate will drop accordingly. This represents an inexorable law of the social development of the humanity, for which Xinjiang is no exception. From the perspective of changing views on childbearing, the declined birth rate in Xinjiang, including the Uyghurs, is associated with inevitable objectivity. As the social and economic development advances, people of different ethnicities are experiencing changes in views on childbearing. First, the increasing improvement of the employment in women contributed to the shift of their views to fewer children and more prosperity. During its fight against poverty, Xinjiang has developed its labor-intensive industries to promote local economic development. Encourage residents to seek jobs outside. They tend to have different thoughts on employment and come to realize that only by farming they can never increase earnings owing to inadequate farming land shared by such a vast population. Gradually, the view on job seeking based on market economy is rooted on their minds. For rural women of ethnic minorities in South Xinjiang, seeking jobs outside not only increase their income, but also breaks the traditional circle of marriage to birth and to farming. Such shift has improved the role of women in their family, boosted their personal development, and increased the right to birth choice. For instance, Bujnet Musa from Ayagataguri Preach Village, Baron Township, Biecheng County, Kashgar Prefecture said, when it comes to the view on childbearing, she said that it is likely to emerge from poverty when the family has more children. That's why my husband and I plan to have another kid when the elder one turns 4 or 5 years old. It will suffice to have two. It's a total different feel from their elder generations. Now, Bujan Musha and her husband rented a piece of land that spans 6.7 hectares. With such land, their lives are getting better and better. Second, steady progress is made in receiving education. It promotes the shift of public views on childbearing to be modern, civilized, and progressive from the once traditional ones. Xinjiang has accelerated the development of education by increasing investment in education. The enrollment rate of schools at all levels is on the rise, with greater access to education among the public and the improving quality of the population. In 2020, the average years of schooling for people aged 15 and above rose from 9.27 years in 2010 to 10.11 years in 2020, which is 0.2 years higher than the national average of 9.91 years. The number of people with high school education grew from 11,500 in 2010 to 30,200 in 2020. As the average number of years receiving education increases, people tend to be abandoning the traditional view on childbearing that this kind of view upholds early marriage and childbearing, more children leading to greater prosperity and carrying out the family line. Instead, a more modern, civilized, progressive view that advocates late marriage and childbearing, fewer and healthier children. As such, more and more people in the region prefer this way according to their own will in terms of family planning. Xinjiang has fought against illegal interference of extremism with marriage in accordance with law, effectively protected both the physical and mental health of women of all ethnicities, respected and protected their basic reproductive rights. According to the Civil Code of the People's Republic of China, both the men and the women intending to enter into a marriage shall file registration of the marriage in person with a marriage registration authority, which conforms to the international practice of holding marriage with civil registration can be deemed as legal, adopted by the majority of the countries in the world. In the past few years, extremist forces had illegally intervened people's marriage by eluding or even coercing the large religious population in Xinjiang, particularly in its southern prefectures, who have limited means of communication outside their own communities and limited knowledge of modern science, into religious marriage by giving nikah or divorce by pronouncing triple talaq. As a result, it becomes evident that many people of ethnic minorities in certain regions of Xinjiang were not up to the threshold of legal age for marriage, that is 20-year-old for men and 80-year-old for women, when they got married. Some girls were not even mature enough, for example, 12 or 30 years of age, when they got married or delivered. It might have a great influence on their health. In recent years, Xinjiang has cracked down on illegal interference in marriage, encouraging local residents to file registration for marriage to protect women's physical and mental health. It is a move that showcases our greatest responsibility and care for the people's interests. Such efforts not only contribute to postponing rather than limiting reproduction, which are not associated with the decline of birth rate. Thank you.
Next, I give the floor to Mr. Muhtaram Sharif, Vice President of Xinjiang Islamic Association and Imam of Xianghang Mosque in Urumqi.
Dear friends from the media, good morning. The paragraph 25 of the assessment claims that there is a list of 75 signs of religious extremism that local authorities and police departments had reportedly started distributing in December 2014. These lists of signs and primary expressions of religious extremism include conduct that falls well within the exercise of fundamental freedoms and which are not per se linked with violence or potential violent action. We firmly oppose what's stated in this paragraph. The 15 manifestations of extremism listed in the regulation of Xinjiang Uygur Autonomous Region on de-radicalization were determined by the legislative department through legal procedures after a period of observation, analysis, and summary. In accordance with counter-terrorism law of China and other laws and regulations. And in consideration of Xinjiang's counter-terrorism and radicalization work. They are the statutory criteria for identifying those affected by extremism. In the process of improving social governance a few years ago, some abnormal phenomena with extremist tendencies were found in some parts of Xinjiang, and some places summed up the manifestations of such tendencies. There is no such thing as a list of 75 signs of religious extremism that local authorities and police head departments had reportedly started distributing in December 2014, let alone implemented it as a law. The manifestations of extremism summarized by some places in Xinjiang are not the so-called acts within the exercise of fundamental freedoms or irrelevant with violence or potential violent action at all, but words and deeds of preaching extreme religious ideas and rejecting and interfering with normal work and life due to the influence of extremism. For a long time, violent terrorist forces deliberately tied extremism to religion, religious believers, and social life. They abetted religious believers to resist government administration, preached that all people who do not follow extreme practices should be regarded as infidels, and incited to assault, reject, and isolate non-religious people. Party members and officials and patriotic religious figures, they denied and rejected all secular cultures, advocating that people should not watch TV, listening to radio, or reading newspapers, forcing people not to cry at funerals and not to laugh at weddings, forbidden people to carry out normal cultural and sports activities, and forced women to wear burqa-like dresses. All these are a negation of modern civilization, a destruction of human progress, and a gross violation of the citizens' human rights. Extremism is the ideological basis of terrorism. It usually incites hatred, discrimination, and violence by distorting religious doctrines or other means. Its spread and development will inevitably lead to violent terrorism. I'd like to cite some examples. The first one is, the gentleman Nijat Mukhtar, a graduate of the Formal Vocational Education and Training Center of Uygur County in South Xinjiang's Kashgar Prefecture, was deluded by extremists a few years ago. Extremist preaching such as Muslims cannot engage with Han people, they can't watch TV, and they can't participate in culture and entertainment activities, and even that they can enter heaven if they kill kafirs. And Han people are all kafirs, and killing the Han people is better than performing 10 years Islamic duties of Arkan Islam. Gradually, Nijat Mukhtar believed what he heard from the extremists. His thoughts changed over time, and he began to worship. Martyrs of jihad. His behavior became more and more radical. He refused to talk or do business with the Han people, and even forbade his children to see a doctor when they were ill. If he was left to follow his own inclination, Nijat Mukhtar would be bound to become a violent terrorist and commit crimes. Later, he learned what's illegal, what's legal, and what can be done and what cannot be done by attending the vocational education and training program. He said that what the extremists want us to do is all illegal, and then they want to turn us into devils that heartlessly slaughter innocent people. OHCHR vigorously proclaims so-called human rights and freedom in this assessment on Xinjiang. Denigrates Xinjiang's counterterrorism and de-radicalization endeavors as human rights violations, and cries out grievances for violent terrorists and extremists. This is an absurd logic that calls black-white and conflates right with wrong. Have the basic human rights of innocent victims of violent terrorist cases been protected? China is a country under the rule of law, and it lawfully protects the rights granted to its citizens by the Constitution and other laws and regulations. Of course, in exercising his or her rights, any citizen should abide by the Constitution and the laws of the country. And should not jeopardize the interests of the state, society, or collective organization, or the legitimate rights of other citizens. Acts of propagating and inciting hatred and discrimination, advocating violence, coercing others to endanger public security, disrupting public order, infringing on personal and property safety, hindering social management, and conducting violent terrorist activities under the cloak of religion will disrupt the normal development of the society, violate the legitimate rights and interests of citizens, and damage national interests. if they are not prevented and punished. The above mentioned acts are not allowed in any country under the rule of law, and any responsible government will take corresponding preventive and strike measures against them. Facts have proven that Xinjiang's efforts to prevent and punish extremist activities in accordance with the law have, to the maximum extent, protected the people of all ethnic groups from the scourge of terrorism and extremism, and has effectively maintained Xinjiang's social stability and long-term peace. It is a just act with broad public support. OHCHR's criticism is utterly unjustifiable.
Thank you. And also the assessment quoted a lot of media reports saying that Xinjiang destructed some religious sites. And now over to Vice President Mohateram to give a brief introduction. Paragraph 85 of the assessment claimed that alongside the increasing restrictions on expression of Muslim religious practice are recurring reports of the destruction of Islamic religious sites, such as mosques, shrines, and cemeteries, especially during the Strike Hard campaign period. The 86th paragraph says that analysis of satellite imagery in the public domain indicates that many religious sites appear to have been removed or changed in their characteristic identifying features, such as the removal of minarets. An illustrative example is the transformation of the Imam Asim shrine, located in southern Xinjiang, north of the city of Hotan. We express our firm opposition to this characterization. In fact, mosques in Xinjiang are protected by law. For many mosques, including the Etha Mosque in Kashgar, the Jiefang South Road Mosque in Yining City, the Jamai Mosque in Hotan, and Yanghang Mosque in Urumqi, which are listed in the national level and autonomous regional level list of protection, the government has allocated special funds for renovation for religious sites in disrepair. The government and competent authorities, following laws and regulations, including the law on urban planning, and also following the expectation and application of local Muslim communities, and by means of reconstruction, relocation, and expansion, has saved potential safety hazards to ensure the normal practice of normal religious activities. At present, mosques in Xinjiang can fully meet the need of religious believers, meet the need of Muslim communities. The conditions in religious sites continue to improve. Most mosques are equipped with running water, electricity, easy road access, natural gas, communications, television and radio, as well as medical services, LED screens, computers, fans or air conditionings, firefighting equipment, water dispensers. In the Juma mosques, there are also ablution facilities and flush toilets, which provide much convenience for Muslim communities. For instance, the Toplakjai Mosque in the city of Aksu was built in 1995. It was rebuilt on the original site in 2017. Xiaodiopu Mosque in Urumqi, built in 1994, and was relocated in 2017 in accordance with the urban planning adjustments and the demand of the local Muslim community, and it was put in use in 2020. The government in Xinjiang respects the funeral customs of the Muslim community, and the local government has allocated special land and built special cemeteries to protect the rights. For instance, in northwestern Aksu, there is a cemetery taking an area of about 350 hectares with 13.5 thousand tombs. Also in Tianshan district, Urumqi city, there is a 120 hectare cemetery which has accommodated over 60,000 dead bodies. In 2020, the government invested an additional 20 million yuan to build a new service building, parking lot, and also renovated the funeral hall. And actually, the Imam Asim Shrine is located in Houten, taking an area of about 3 hectares. Now the shrine is in perfect condition. There is no such thing as the tomb and mosque being destructed, as claimed by the assessment. Southeast to the Imam Asim Shrine, there used to be a mosque which was built in the 1930s. Because it was in disrepair, it naturally collapsed in 2017. So the government made use of the Tawaz Mosque, which was built in 1932 and rebuilt in 1996, taking an area of about 1,300 square meters to meet the need of local Muslims. And that's all from me. And thank you very much. Next, some information on the Vocational Education and Training Center. To give a full information to the international community on the VETCs, the State Council Information Office of China released a white paper in 2019 titled Xinjiang's Vocational Education and Training. Since the end of 2018, many foreign delegates who visited Xinjiang came to these VETCs or former VETCs in person. In May this year, the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ms. Michelle Bachelet, also visited the original site of the VETC. However, in the OHCHR assessment, there are still allegations that VETCs have mass so-called detainments and so on, which are against the fact. Next, I'll give the floor to Mr. Yakon Yakov to talk about relevant issues. The paragraph 44 said that a stay in the VETC facility is, from the concerned individual's perspective, of indefinite nature, the end of which is only determined by meeting undefined criteria as evaluated by the authorities. Paragraph 57 claims that the government has indicated that VTC facilities are now closed and that all trainees have graduated, thereby suggesting that these facilities may no longer be in use. OHCHR is not in a position to confirm this, which is primarily due to the lack of relevant official or other information since the end of 2019 and access for on-the-ground verification. We are firmly against such conclusions. VETCs in Xinjiang were established in accordance with law, intended at de-radicalization, mainly aiming to carry out education and rehabilitation to persons who were affected by extremist ideology and committed minor violation of law or committed minor crimes. They were committed to root out the conditions for terrorism and extremism to spread. The VETCs were adopting a residential management, allowing the trainees to go back home regularly, and they might ask for leave to attend personal affairs. The personal freedom of trainees in VETCs were protected by law. There is no such thing as trainees being detained in VETCs, as claimed in the OHCHR assessment. In the assessment, it claims that from the personal perspective, the stay in VETC is of indefinite nature. This is totally wrong. Xinjiang has carried out vocational education and training in accordance with law and effectively curbed the frequent occurrence of violent and terrorist activities and protected the people of all ethnic groups from the scourge of terrorism and extremism to the largest extent. By October 2019, all trainees taking part in the programs completed their study and graduated. So there is no such thing as indefinite stay in VETCs. And actually, while carrying out the programs, the length of training are determined case by case. And also in the assessment, there is an allegation that the end of stay at VETC is only determined by meeting undefined criteria as evaluated by the authorities. This is totally untrue. In carrying out vocational education and training, the centers and the trainees agreed on the training objectives, graduation standards, and examination methods. As long as the trainees meet the criteria for graduation and pass the exams, they can graduate. For example, in a VETC in Halton City, for standard spoken and written Chinese, trainees would take written and oral examinations. For laws and regulations, the trainees could take either written or oral exams. On de-radicalization, it was assessed by the changes in ideology and taken a comprehensive assessment methods. And for technical skills, the same standards as the local human rights, human resources, and social security departments were applied to the trainees. After the trainees passed all the 4 examinations, the VETC would help them with graduation formalities. And also in the VETC in Kashgar city, there was a very detailed standard for graduation that after studying and learning, the trainees have developed a much stronger sense and awareness in laws, could basically use standard Chinese, mastered some technical skills, understood the harm of terrorism and extremism, and broke free from terrorism and extremism. Before a trainee started the program, the VETC would clearly inform the graduation standards for each trainees. There is no such thing as undefined criteria for graduation. And also in the assessment, there is an allegation that it is impossible to confirm if the facilities are not in use. This is just out of speculation. And actually, in some places in Xinjiang, the local governments, in order to provide better education and saving resources, would change the vocational high schools into VETCs. And after the VETCs were no longer in use, the facilities will still be used as vocational high schools. For instance, the former VETC in Kucha city used to be a middle school. After the VETC was completed, the facility was shared by Kucha City Secondary Vocational Technical School and Kucha Technician School. The former VETC in Awadh County used to be Awadh Vocational High School. And after the vocational education and training ended, the facility went on to be used by Awadh Technician School. The former VETC of Wushi County used to be Wushi Vocational High School, and they went on to be used by Wushi County Vocational and Technical School. During the OHCHR delegation's visits in May this year to Xinjiang, the representatives also visited the original sites of VETCs, held in-depth discussions and exchanges with many graduated trainees from VETCs. And they also made positive comments to Xinjiang's vocational education and training, Xinjiang's stability and development, and Xinjiang's protection of human rights and counterterrorism and de-radicalization measures. Regrettably, OHCHR overturned the results of its own field research and relied on the rumors and lies of some so-called witnesses. It is fooled by this very well-planned show. We actually welcome OHCHR delegates to visit Xinjiang once again to understand the real situation.
Thank you. We used about 2 hours to comprehensively brief you on Xinjiang the concerns of some of issues as well as our positions and opinions regarding the High Commissioner's assessment. We responded with clarification. Yes, this assessment contains numerous information. Yes, there are a lot more still remaining to be clarified due to its incorrectness, and we will take chance in due course in bring to you more of our clarifications or responses, and to expose, the true picture that OHCHR is always manipulated by anti-China forces in the US and some Western countries. And we would like to leave some time to have interactions with you.
The question is, why are you in Geneva? Who are you meeting with here? And what is your message to them about the Human Rights Council? Does China fear an investigation by any rights expert that might be mandated by the Human Rights Council?
好的，谢谢这位记者朋友的提问。这个问题呢，由我来给您做一些情况介绍。首先呢，为什么要到联合国日内瓦总部来介绍有关情况？这是由联合国日内瓦总部这个重要的平台的性质、地位和作用所决定的。因为在这里呢，这个云集了各国的媒体记者朋友和各国的驻华使节。只有到这个地方，我们的声音才会讲得更清楚，传得更远，才能让更多的朋友了解到这个来自新疆的这些情况的介绍。这个今天呢也见到了很多记者朋友，如果我们不来日内瓦的话，我们可能很难面对面的交流情况。所以这是第一点考虑第二点呢，实际上我们在过去这几年也向国际社会这个进行了大量的情况介绍，不知道各位关注到了多少？比如说我们已经召开了79场社交问题新闻发布会。当然，今天也是一个具有标志性意义的一个安排。这是我们的第80场社交问题专题的新闻发布会。但是我不知道你们过去关注了多少场，我们介绍的情况你们了解了多少？但是今天我们面对面的进行介绍，我相信你们非常直观的。也相对比较全面系统的能够了解到我们的这个情况。再一点，从国际舆论场上看，虽然我们介绍了大量的情况，许多媒体记者朋友包括西方一些媒体记者朋友也做了一些报道但是我们仍然遗憾地看到一些媒体记者参加了新疆自治区的专题新闻发布会，但是呢 没有去报道。一些媒体记者朋友这个甚至不相信自己听到的，包括到新疆去的一些媒体记者朋友，不相信自己看到的做了一些选择性的报道、歪曲的报道、片面的报道所以我想呢，这是我们新疆情况的一个重要的一个原因我给大家举个例子比如说 BBC， 我不知道今天有没有 BBC 的记者朋友BBC 的记者呢，曾经多次到新疆去进行采访期间呢，我也陪同BBC 的有关记者到教培中心去进行采访。我印象里边呢是在2019年，当时教培中心呢还在开办过程当中，刚才我们也向大家介绍了2019年的10月教培中心学院已经结业教培中心呢已经关闭。那么当时教培中心还在正常的举办当中。BBC 的记者在教培中心教室里同学员进行了充分的自由的交流也拍摄了大量的画面。但是在 BBC 后来制作的这个节目当中他们把在教培中心教室里拍到的学员这个上课进行技能培训这样的一些画面说成是学员被剥夺了自由说教培中心是集中营。那么对这样的一些媒体记者我们表示非常的遗憾也表示坚决的反对所以我想呢，通过我们面对面的现场进行交流，有助于大家进一步了解新疆的真实情况，包括大家有什么疑问我们都可以当面坦诚的向大家做出解释和说明这是第一点。第二点呢，到联合国这个日内瓦总部来，我们当然愿意见到很多我们想见的人，只是不知道对方有没有时间来进行安排但经过这个双方的这个商量呢我们接下来呢还要进行一系列的活动比如同高专办的有关官员要进一步的这个进行交流。我们还将在人权理事会有关这个会议上进一步的介绍新疆的情况因为我们认为这个我们从新疆自治区到日内瓦来也是不远万里希望见到当然在条件允许的情况下见到更多的各方面的人士去介绍新疆情况。第三一点您提到的就是有关是涉疆决议是吧？是这个问题吗？我直觉上认为他们可能不是为了宣传介绍新疆人权事业取得的成就，而是要
going to make some false allegations against human rights in Xinjiang. I'm not sure of the details, but we can tell from their previous actions. So I don't think. Second, the progress of human rights development in Xinjiang are seen to the world. By the end of 2018, since the end of 2018, we have invited 170 or nearly 200 delegations to Xinjiang. Including over 2,500 people have visited Xinjiang, including officials from the Human Rights Foundation. They visited a lot of places in Xinjiang and held face-to-face interaction with the local community. it's fair to say that there's no prejudice. It is totally possible to know, to see a real Xinjiang and to understand, respecting and protection of human rights in Xinjiang, or human rights.
当然，我们也希望国际社会
We do hope the international community,
有关人士
people from Western countries can visit Xinjiang once again.
在和田、在乌鲁木齐
We are ready to welcome you once again in Kashgar and in Urumqi.
3点
We have a lot of discussion.
社会一些势力甚至是反华势力搞所谓的
Some forces,
动议
especially anti-China forces, are working on some so-called Xinjiang-related motions or proposals.
针对
We are not afraid of their rules
的一些安排
or any potential arrangement and results.
针锋相对的坚决的
We
斗争
will
目的就是让
have
正义
resolute
照亮世界
countermeasures
化
so
为
that
阴霾笼罩人们的心头
justice can prevail
谢谢
and so people are not fooled by lies. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking my question, Neil Larson from the AFP. I'd like to follow up on what you were just saying about the possible resolution at the council. Would you say that you're ready for the fight? Could you give a bit more detail about what specifically you would are doing to counter those measures? And about the visit with OHC officials, could you say a bit more about who you're planning on meeting and why you think it's important to change that? Thank you.
好的，感谢您的提问。首先，这个
Ladies and gentlemen, and due to technical issues, I can't hear the questions very clearly. I'll start from the answer.
我们希望能同人权办的有关官员
We do hope to meet with relevant officials from our CHR, but this depends on the schedules and work arrangements of both sides.
要同高专办的官员见面呢，因为高专办
Why are we hoping to meet the officials from our CHR? It's because that in May, some officials visited Xinjiang,
首先我们这个中国有句话，第一次生，第二回生。
and there's a saying in China that the first time we meet, we are not familiar, but the second time we are already friends. So from many perspectives, we hope to meet them again in Geneva.
同高专办
The second, we are looking forward to further exchanges with OHCHR and to make clear of our positions, attitudes, and views on relevant issues. So we are really honored to have this opportunity, but let's see what will happen next.
关于您刚才讲到的
And also on your question on
我们将
the relevant HRC resolutions and what kind of measures the Xinjiang side will take. From the perspective of Xinjiang,
大的愿望也是我们
our biggest wish and our endeavor is to introduce to the world a real Xinjiang,
相信
because we believe that
多数人
most people in the world can see things clearly
客观公正的
and they can view things
分清
from an objective and just view,
善恶
and they can tell right from wrong
这个
and tell truth from lies.
所以我们首
They
先
hold this attitude
事实的力量
and they are able to do this. So we can use facts to show the reality and the real situation of Xinjiang and to show the force of justice.
其实我刚才已经讲到了
The second, as I just mentioned,
下一步眼里所
because Xinjiang is not what some people see.
好地方
Xinjiang is a wonderful land. So
世界上所有的人
we need to let the world see how wonderful this land is.
如果世界上的绝大多数人都认识到了真实的新疆
If most people understand the real situation, then some so-called Xinjiang-related resolutions will have nowhere to, will have no influence, and no one will believe in them, just like this assessment by OHCHR. I hope that from today's press conference, we can develop a better understanding, and we can see clearly that some so-called resolutions by international organizations are not really for helping Xinjiang develop human rights, but to smear Xinjiang. Such moves are just a tool by some anti-China forces, and we will definitely act against such resolutions. Thank you.
My question is what you plan to do about the report. Are there any sanctions planned against individuals?
关于这份社交报告，新疆下一步打算做什么？
In light of the visits of Madame Bachelet and this report,
以及对于巴切莱特高专长相这份社交报告，
or other organizations such as the and will you allow free and unfettered access? Thank you.
这个问题还是由我来给您这个进行解释啊。
So thank you for your question. On this report by OHCHR, we have actually made some efforts before the release of the assessment. We already took various measures to make explanations to OHCHR, and we gave a full introduction to the situation in Xinjiang. Where I also understand that representatives from the local communities also sent emails to OHCHR and the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, telling their personal experience and sharing the real situation in Xinjiang. And this kind of work will continue. For instance, on August the 31st, the day that OHCHR released the so-called assessment, we also released a report titled Fighting Terrorism and Extremism in Xinjiang, the Truth and Facts on the OHCHR website. So I hope you can make a visit to this report. I think through these efforts, you can have a full and objective view on Xinjiang and make some objective comments. The second, Xinjiang is open to the world. And of course, there are many to be improved in human rights in Xinjiang. But there is no such thing as claimed in the assessment or some Western countries. There is no such thing as mass human rights abuses. And also from the perspective of Xinjiang, we are ready to further engage with international human rights bodies, including the ILO. And this kind of engagement can take various means. including letters, video conferences, and also if possible, we also welcome the representatives from the ILO to Xinjiang to understand the real situation. But we don't want to see that the international organizations take a biased view on Xinjiang, or even become the political tools of anti-China forces to accuse Xinjiang based on groundless basis. This is not the kind of engagement we want, which will shut the gate for further cooperation and exchanges. And also, this will do no good to human rights development in Xinjiang, in China, and in the world. So a positive, objective, and constructive engagement, dialogue, and cooperation is what we want. And we do hope to further introduce our practices and experience in protecting and respecting human rights in events like this. And we are ready to learn from the experiences and practices of the world in protecting human rights. We also want to make our due contribution to promoting human rights around the world, but we need to stick to a very fundamental position that anyone who comes to Xinjiang, who visits Xinjiang, cannot be based on an investigation or unlimited, because China is a sovereign country. We cannot bear any kind of action that undermines the sovereignty. So actually, I have taken all these questions today. So friends from the media, because we have other events. As you know, we have a quite intense schedule these days. And today is the first day in Geneva for us. Due to time constraints, the introduction and the question and answer ends here. But we still have the opportunities, a lot of opportunities to have further engagements and exchanges. We want to take this opportunity to call on the international community to be clear-eyed about the truth and facts of Xinjiang's fight against terrorism and extremism, and make the right choice between the good and evil, bright and dark, and progressive and retrogressive. We advise international organizations, including UN human rights bodies, to investigate the human rights disasters caused and numerous crimes committed by the US and some other Western countries, both home and abroad, and urge them to offer compensation to the victims of human rights disasters. We also hope the international communities and the friends here can visit Xinjiang to experience in person a real Xinjiang of economic development, social stability, ethnic unity, and see the beautiful scenery of the wonderful land of Xinjiang. We welcome you to Xinjiang, and we hope to see you in Xinjiang. So that will be the end of the press conference. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your attention. And thank you to the spokespersons for their introduction. Thank you very much. Goodbye.